Transformers. More than meets the eye. So Transformers has become a bit of a big franchise since it started off as a toy line in the 1980s.
Released by Hasbro in Japan, Transformers also had a show released alongside it to help promote the toys. Its story revolved around robots who could transform into vehicles, planes, cars and even boats. These robots were in two separate camps, the always good Autobots led by Rebel Jesus himself, Optimus Prime, and the dastardly Decepticons with the calculated Megatron being their frontman.
The show was and still is loved by many, and it must pain those fans to see what represents the franchise these days.
The big blockbuster movies have not gone down well with fans of the franchise or even movie fans in general. I've only seen the first and second films myself, and while I don't know a lot about Transformers, from what I do know, the good wasn't exactly well represented in these films, which seemed to focus way too much on the humans.
Not really why we came, Michael. Like with what seems to be everything, my little knowledge of Transformers comes from the Transformers PS2 game, also known as Transformers 2004 and Transformers Prelude to Energon, which is the sequel series to Armada, which this game is based on.
It was my friend Sam who was mega into this series, and at the time I craved this friendship like this mop craved a haircut, so I went along with whatever he liked. Poor, easily led 10-year-old me.
In fact, I remember us two having a bit of a fallout in primary school, and not long after I got this Unicron toy. We made up because of it, and we're still best friends 13 years later, so hot dang, that must have been some toy. Somewhere around that time I got the game too, although it was so long ago I don't exactly remember. I do remember how amazing the game was though. So today we're going to be taking our attention away from Megan Fox's ass to look at a 14-year-old PS2 game. I'm a man.
So this game is based on the 2002 toy line and TV show Transformers Armada. I haven't seen the show myself personally, so I'm not sure if the show gives off the same tone as the game, but look what you're greeted with when you boot this game up.
Transformers.
Dark, foreboding, mysterious.
The game opens with a beautiful CG cutscene. The Autobots seem to be losing the war against the Decepticons on their home planet of Cybertron, when suddenly a distress signal from their smaller counterparts, the Minicons, interrupts Megatron finally taking down Optimus and scratching that itch he hasn't been able to reach for years. Both sides know that the Minicons have the power to tip the scales in their favour, so they venture off to Earth to try and not only collect the Minicons for themselves, but to stop the other side collecting them too.
Autobots, we must stop Megatron. Roll out!
The story from this point loosely follows the show. It doesn't really develop into anything spectacular until near the end, where you discover that Megatron is not the true enemy, Unicron is. Regardless, the story does its job, and like the intro, is told through these stunning cutscenes and stellar voice work by the cast of the actual show.
Search the area. Yes, sir.
The game is a weird hybrid between sandbox adventure and third-person shooter. You're tasked with exploring these landscapes to collect Minicons and defeat Decepticons and their minions, the Decepticlones. Each drop zone,
hey up boys, where we're dropping, wait,
leads to a different area of Earth, and trust me, you'll be exploring a varied amount of the planet. Amazon rainforests, Alaskan mountains, and the Antarctican wasteland. You'll even be heading out to the ocean too. Each area has orders the other Autobots will ask you to carry out, which is just regular updates on your position and where you should head next. So the game does focus itself, but in doing so does sometimes make you feel like you're going from one side of the map to the other. But it's not always like this. Areas like the ocean have you gliding over to explore a Decepticon battleship and shut it down, while Starship has you exploring an enemy spaceship just for it to tip upside down, meaning you have to climb back up it sideways as you pursue the Decepticon Starscream. I'll say it's probably the most unique level in the game. The level design is on top form here. Not only is it so well laid out that you can explore it when it's one way, but it's crafted to work when it's completely shifted around too. The atmosphere is also on point here. It's quiet, there's not too many enemies, and it's all about exploring these tight area corridors. The Autobots you'll be gaining through these corridors come in the form of Optimus Prime, Red Alert, and the rookie of the group, Hotshot. Each character has attributes to suit different preferences. Optimus is the powerhouse of the group. Being the leader, I guess that's what you'd expect. He can dish it out but also take it back, like a banter king. He does move the slowest though, making him pretty clunky to control, I won't lie. At least ramming into enemies as a truck is very cathartic. Hotshot is the cheeky speedster. I mean, thank God really, he is the sports car. You'll be doing the most dodging and picking your spots wisely with this guy, since you must have practically no armour because his defence is absolute garbage. You could blow on this guy, and he'd get thrown halfway across the level.
More on that in a bit.
Hotshot's attack also isn't great. It can get the job done, but you'll have to do a lot of moving about to make him work, which is fun in its own way. I just hope you're a fan of exercise if you fancy giving Hotshot a joyride. Lastly, we have Red Alert, who is my personal favourite. He's a combination of both Optimus and Hotshot, being pretty fast and also being able to take hits and pack a punch. He's the calculated second in command, being a jack of all trades. Choosing your Autobot is important for each level. If you're going to be stuck in tight spaces with not much movement, you might as well go with Optimus since he's the prime fighter. Hotshot is better for areas of open spaces so he can move about, and Red Alert is pretty well rounded to work wherever. But if you find yourself having difficulty with some parts of the game, changing your Autobot might work wonders, but really it's all about the main stars of the show, the reason the Transformers have come to Earth in the first place, the Minicons. These little dudes have the abilities to combine with the bigger Transformers to give them all kinds of different abilities, ranging from weapons like beam attacks and rocket launchers, to more fun ones like gliders, invisibility, and even turning Decepticons to your side temporarily.
But which is better at crashing through doors, Phil or Mr. Blobby? There's only one way to find out.
There's a great variety of Minicons here. It's like opening a Kinder Egg, never knowing what you'll find inside, and when you find them all, getting to that point though is going to take some work however, as you won't have access to every Minicon that can be obtained in a level on the first visit. You'll have to find other Minicons first to allow you to access those areas, which locks off some of the stronger Minicons in the efforts of making the game a bit more non-linear, which I can get behind because when you revisit these areas, the enemies have new placements and formations, greatly increasing the difficulty for retrieving these stronger Minicons. When you eventually find these dudes, there are some limitations to stop you just equipping the best Minicons or breaking the game. For starters, some Minicons can only be equipped to certain buttons, like Covert can only be attached to L2 and R2. I'm sure this is to stop certain combinations of Minicons being possible and making the game a cakewalk in the process. But it's a bit overkill I feel, as not only do you have this button restriction but you also have a loadout meter. Each Autobot can hold a different amount of firepower, with each Minicon taking up from 1 to 4 loadout spaces, depending on how powerful they are. Optimus can hold the most and Hotshot can hold the least, unfortunately decreasing Hotshot's firepower lower than it already was. Each Minicon is of a different colour, red, green, yellow and blue. Since each colour group is a good variety of weaker and stronger Minicons, you can easily colour coordinate your loadout, which in using more of the same colour increases your health bar, injecting even more strategy into choosing your loadout. Don't be afraid to experiment with different combinations regardless of colour though. Sometimes using two Minicons together can create interesting results, like using Slipstream and Full Speed essentially triples how far you can glide, almost becoming flat out flight, which is one of my favourite abilities in open world games. Some Minicons do have abilities tied to them that makes very little sense however. Case in point is High Jump, a Minicon that makes you be able to jump higher.
What you say? That you only meant well.
This would have been much better as a permanent upgrade, as you have to keep this Minicon equipped for certain parts of the game, and it takes up a valuable spot that really didn't have to be given up. The sort of the same can be said for Slipstream, but it really is prevalent with High Jump. Actually, the jumping as a whole is wonky as hell. If you're stood on the slant of a cliff or platform, even if you move forward and jump, you don't jump forward, you jump in the direction the slant is facing. This is very annoying as it could be the difference between life and death, most notably in Alaska when you're having to traverse these cliffs. The amount of times I fell down because of these shitty jumping mechanics was ridiculous. It doesn't compare to this part inside the mountain though. Now parts of this game can be horrendously dark, like Decepticon Battleship, the Pyramid and Deep Amazon, even under these trees. In daytime. I turned my TV's brightness to max and while it made certain levels bearable, it practically did nothing for this section in Alaska. You cannot see fuck all. Combined with the wonky jumping, I do not know how I got up to the top, but I do know that it took at least 36 years. And then this happened.
Clearly I will go sailing no more.
I honestly wanted to stop playing right there and then. It's definitely the worst part of the game. How on earth they thought it was a good idea to make dark areas completely pitch black, I don't know. Traversing can be a big pain because of the darkness and wonky jumping, and to be honest, I go so far as to say it can really ruin the game in some areas. I for one really came to dislike the Alaskan level just because it brought all these problems together, while in the other levels I could just about forgive it. Luckily the things trying to stop you having a good time do the exact opposite. The enemies in the game are fantastic. Not only the Decepticons themselves, which we'll get to in a minute, but also their help while on Earth, the Decepticlone army. These guys are so fun to destroy and fight against. Not only does the army have a great variety of units to it, but they're also intelligent too, like shooting where you're going to be. diving out the way of your attacks, and even running away when things get tough.
Okay, that's all the time I've got. I gotta get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS.
I dare say that the bosses are the highlights of the game. Well, let's go in the first one, who doesn't really count, and Unicron, whose level is again so fucking dark. Can you tell me you know what's going on here? Can you? Just give me some fucking light. We're in space, where's the sun? Luckily the actual Decepticons are so much fun to fight against. They each have an awesome CG cutscene to introduce them, and it really sets the tone for the fight to come. I did get jealous though. How come none of the Autobots fought to get vessels that transformed into planes and shit? Come on, I want to fly, yet I'm stuck with this lumbering mess. It's what makes Starscream and Cyclonus especially so hard to fight. They can transform into their aircrafts at any moment and bombard you with missiles and high energy beams. I think at the end of the day though, they just want to be friends.
F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all.
Down here in the deep blue sea.
Or even more.
I want Megatron.
How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes, got nowhere to run.
Tidal Wave was an awesome choice to include. When I was younger I remember exploring him as a battleship, then when I found out he was a Decepticon and saw him transform I was all,
I have to fight that thing.
Despite this, he's actually on the easier side, but the fight itself is still great. Megatron's fight is also awesome too. Just for the love of God, don't let him touch you.
Seismic toss!
Combat in general is really fun. You can try to stealth your way through, but going in all guns blazing most of the time works just as well. Larger areas have you dodge and weave and use terrain to your advantage, even destroying some in the process. It not only makes the game more action-packed, but it also just looks cool. Big mention to the melee finishers which go into this Matrix slowdown effect. There's also the power link feature which you get after the first level. It allows you to link up with your personal minicon tied to whichever Autobot you're playing as. It reminds me of Hyper Mode from Metroid Prime 3 and that increases the damage you dish out, but drains your health in the process. I barely use this though since endurance is a pretty big deal, so I valued that more than just busting through everything and dying in the process. Unfortunately there's no lock-on feature, which means you'll be going at it freehand. I don't mind this too much for regular enemies, but for bosses I do think this would have been a welcome addition. If not for locking on, at least making the camera lock on. Starscream and Cyclonus especially can be hard to keep track of because they can just fly away. It's a way of making the game artificially harder, which I find strange because it's not like the Decepticons or their masters are badly designed. Speaking of difficulty, you can customise it to suit your needs. There's 3 options here, and I personally use the middle one veteran for this playthrough, since that's usually the sweet spot and the one the developers made the game in mind with. And yeah, it can be challenging. I do think a couple of the later levels they just overload it with enemies, so it becomes a bit of a chore instead of feeling like you're testing your abilities, but the bosses especially are a fair, welcome challenge. The ragdoll physics are a bizarre feature, but everyone loves ragdoll physics and it's why it's so funny here especially. Sometimes you'll get hit by a missile and just start spasming on the floor. The enemies will even stop and wait for you to get up when you're in ragdoll mode so they can't combo you. A very nice touch. Another nice touch was to include cheats for this game. I still have mine written down in the case from 14 years ago.
Sweet Jesus.
Essential cheats. You're telling me 11-year-old me thought big heads weren't essential?
Looks like a bug.
This is one of those where they said, hey, if you want to go nuts and break the game, here's the tools. You can disable the overload function so you can equip 4 max power minicons if you so desire. You can have unlimited health, infinite power link, and even minicon specific abilities that won't run out. Like Covert here, who lets you turn invisible. And hey, if you don't even have Covert, not to worry because there's cheats to let you unlock all minicons too, so you can have fun straight from the get-go. I really miss this in new games because these features are left out for DLC, or they get criticism for being their super guide. There's a difference between being a super guide and cheats designed to let the player run wild. If there's any reason not to use Covert though, it's these visuals, because holy crap they are fantastic. This is the mid PS2, but everything looks incredible, especially the models of the Autobots, bosses and enemies that are brimming with detail right down to ridges in their armour. It's hard to comment on the textures as I feel they're not very blurry or murky, but like I was saying before, the game can be extremely dark in places, so maybe it's trying to disguise the shoddy textures? I couldn't really say. From high up the areas look great and the draw distance is very impressive for any game, let alone a licensed title most likely on a budget. Now I'm not a frame rate expert, but the game can feel 60 FPS at times, although more realistically it's probably like 30. It does at least keep this fairly consistent until a load of enemies blow up on screen, which if I'm honest I kind of like the slowdown because it has this dramatic effect. Unintended sure, but let's call it a happy accident. To top off the graphics cake, the CG scenes are plentiful and beautiful. They've even recreated each scene 3 times to include the Autobot you're playing as. They could have just lazed their way around that, but it's a very nice attention to detail. And the praises just keep on coming when it comes to the game's music, because holy god, if the spine of the game is the gameplay, then the music is the muscle supporting it. The tone and intensity that is so important to get you immersed all comes from this exceptional OST, and its genius comes down to its tensity system. Each area has its own music, but it has 3 or 4 levels of tensity to it. So when you're exploring and it doesn't seem like there's much about to happen, there's this calm but tense feeling that anything could happen. This works great especially in tighter areas where it becomes more of a thriller experience. But once you see something, or an enemy might have noticed you, the tempo starts to pick up, a few instruments start to chime in, this continues until you're bombarded the opposition or they've found you, and then it all kicks off. It helps that it just sounds really good. It's not something I would listen to in my own time I don't think, but for the game it's perfect and honestly carries the entire package to some degree. Not all tracks have the tensity function, like boss themes and menu music, but do not fret my little petals because they are just as incredible, ranging from high speed battles of Starscream, to the gargantuan feeling of Tidal Wave. Transformers is definitely a different beast now compared to when it came out. At the time of its release, I would have said it was a leading example in the third-person shooter genre. It was that good. And it was just one of those games that I played because it was fun, even if I wasn't trying to collect anything. Coming back to it though, I can't say it's quite the same game that I remember. It's still good, it's got great visuals, incredible music, and very solid gameplay of well-designed levels. It's just a shame that its few flaws do bring down the experience considerably. Especially the wonky jumping in the absurdly dark areas, even in places that have no business blinding you, like under the trees in the Amazon.
This would be so much easier if I wasn't colorblind.
But Melbourne House have really created something special here, and I still believe this is the best Transformers game created. So if you're a fan of the series, you should really give this one a go. There's a ton of fan service that I haven't even mentioned. Grabbing these daily cons in a level grant you access to a whole bunch of extras, art, music, toy promotions, and even TV spots for the original Transformers TV series, which are, to say the least, magical.
Stay with me! I'm on you like glue! Alright! Hi guys, can I skate with you? Nah, you're just a girl.
I'm no Transformers expert, but even I like the little jab Starscream against Megatron here.
This is the end, Starscream. I want Megatron.
Get in line.
Nothing comes of it, but I know Starscream is historically known as a traitor, so it was a nice nod to the fans. It's a shame the developers went defunct, this is one of their last games. Who knows, if they created a sequel we could have gotten another great go at the Transformers brand, and not, you know. What was once a leading example is dimmed into an above average shooter, but it's definitely been made with a love for the source material and it's still a good time. So if you're interested, listen to Big Daddy Optimus.
Autobots, we must stop Megatron. Roll out!